Thank you all for joining us today for a panel discussion on faculty careers for STEM and higher education. We're excited to have you all here along with our distinguished panelists, and we hope this panel will provide valuable insights and guidance for those exploring faculty career-wise in academia. So before we begin, I would like to kind of have a different panel that we'll have or a different event. It's a mock networking event with alumni for grad students and postdocs, and we'll have these speakers, alumni, who will be helping with that networking event. And so if you're interested, you can register on Handshake, and that's the QR code that it will be May 1st in the sales auditorium. So, this back to our panel. Okay, so we'll start with panelist introductions and move forward with a couple of prepared questions. And after going through all of those, we'll open it up to the audience for any questions that you may all have. And so we'll just begin. So to our panelists, could you please introduce yourselves with your name, current role, and office or department?
I guess I'm supposed to start. So I'm Tori Truskowski. I am the Assistant Director of Research Security and Export Control within Research Integrity, which falls under the Division of Research.
I'm Melissa Simon. I'm a Director of Business Development with Brown Technology Innovations, which also falls under the Division of Research.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Edel Minogue, and I am the Senior Director for the Office of Research Strategy and Development, also within the Division of Research. You see it?
Hi, everyone. I'm Logan Jen. I am Assistant Director of STEM, not in the same office, but in the Sheridan Center for Teaching to Query.
Thank you all. So we'll begin with the first question, and I think we can just go down the line. So first question is, what motivated you to pursue a non-faculty career in higher education? And what steps did you take to transition from PhD research in STEM discipline to your current position?
Starting with Jay again? Okay. Yeah, I have notes because I have a tendency to talk for too long. So my main motivations as the time I got to the end of my PhD was I was looking for stability and work-life balance because I had a 4-month-old baby when I defended. And then in addition to that, I was really looking to learn new skills. And it appeared that the parts of grad school that I enjoyed, like running experiments and analyzing data, becomes less and less of the job when you become a professor. And so I was looking for something new. Throughout grad school, I was doing a lot of science communication work, and I did a bunch of stuff through the Sheridan Center. I was one of their teaching consultants, and did a lot of presenting my research. And then when an opportunity came up to become a grant coordinator with a focus on helping people with fellowships, I jumped over to that. And then I sort of randomly jumped through a connection into export control, which nobody lands in export control on purpose. We all ended up there kind of through a sideways path. And now I'm Brown's export control officer 5 years later. And so I'm like the expert around here on export control. So that's kind of cool.
Okay. So I actually left academia before coming back. So I, at least similarly, about halfway through my PhD, I was kind of looking at my research and realizing that nothing was working. And sort of my aspirations to continue on in academia and have to write my own grants and all of that, I had zero interest in pursuing that. But I realized that I really liked the research aspect and the thinking and the strategy development, but not being at a bench and holding a pipette. So I was looking for ways that I could use the same type of sort of stay involved in research, but not actually be the one doing the research. While I was a grad student, I actually had the opportunity to intern with the equivalent of my office, my current office, at Columbia, which is where I did my PhD. And I think in the second question, I'll get into what I actually do for a job. But I interned with my office and had the opportunity to sort of see how research can be translated into sort of commercial pathways. And that's what my role is. And it really showed me that instead of doing research, I wanted to be more on the business side. when I finished, I actually thought I wanted to stay in tech transfer, was told go out and work in industry and then come back. So that's what I did. So I left. I worked in consulting for about 9 years, working with a small boutique healthcare consulting firm that worked mostly with pharmaceutical companies on commercialization strategy of new drugs. And then, similar to Tori, I was looking for a little more stability, had a kid, and needed to make some changes and not be in consulting anymore. Also moved to Rhode Island. I worked for a little bit with the state doing economic development, and then always knew that I kind of wanted to come back to this tech transfer role that I'd interned as a PhD student. And so when the opportunity arose for me to come back to academia and work in that role full time, I took advantage of it.
So my pathway, it's a long and winding road, much like Melissa's. So between getting my PhD and this position, there was approximately 15, 16 years. As you probably can gather from my accent, I'm from Ireland originally, but I did my PhD in Germany. I went and did a postdoc in Ireland directly after my PhD, and then I moved to Los Alamos, where I worked at Los Alamos National Lab for 6 years, first of all as a postdoc, and then as they converted me to a staff scientist, where I was engaged in doing research for a variety of applications, both civilian and kind of military applications. But I really, really enjoyed my research. I just loved everything to do with the research. So I felt like this was my life. I was going to stay in research. Although, life throws things at you. And one of them was I met my future husband and he wandered off to Providence. So I followed. And I ended up running a startup company, which was a spin-off of the chemistry department here. And so from there, I got to know the community in Rhode Island, the community of Brown. And while the startup company was great, there are times where things are very lean in startup companies. I'm sure you probably are aware of this. And so to make ends meet, I also did a little consulting on the side. And so Brown actually hired me to kind of do an assessment of energy research across campus. And this was my foray into kind of this area that I currently do, which is research development. And so when an opportunity arose, they kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, would you be interested in this? Like, this is kind of something that we valued your input and we think you're good at it. And I, at the time, also had young children, and I was like, stability, I think Tori mentioned, I was like, this is much more stable than, a startup company where you're constantly writing proposals and going out pitching ideas, but you're still at the forefront of research. Although it is a 9 to 5, and I'm not like panicking about where's the money coming in at the end of the month. So I decided to, make that transition. I doffed my lab coat and moved to the other side of the bench, and here I am. All to you.
Yeah, so I'll begin. I have a background in biology, and I always kind of had a passion and kind of a consideration for education and kind of the way in which we teach biology. So I started my PhD in biology, but ultimately transitioned my research to think about biology education and education pedagogy. So I had, through kind of my own personal challenges with navigating biology curricula, biology research, lab experiences, etc., I got really interested in thinking about kind of systems and structures in higher education. So this was, kind of midway through my PhD. I've been thinking about, what is, this worth? What am I doing? Kind of, existential crisis, but really thinking about kind of how does this work matter in value? So then I got really interested in thinking about STEM education, science education, kind of how we can improve the ways in which we teach science, teach STEM, teach biology. And through that, I got to do essentially education research as part of my PhD. And the chapters of my dissertation are focused on students with disabilities navigating biology curriculum. So that was really something that kind of, my personal experience kind of inspired my approach to my position kind of in graduate school. And then as I was kind of beyond that, kind of navigating, I really was frustrated in some ways with the ways in which we do research in biology and biology education, and kind of the findings that we have in terms of kind of translating into practical steps kind of in the classroom. So I'll talk kind of in our next question about the role that I get to do now with the Sheridan Center, but really kind of thinking about how we can take research into practice and best practices kind of into the classroom and actually make it act. I also will say I finished my PhD kind of during the height of the pandemic. So I know we were talking about kind of personal kind of life circumstances, and I was very kind of burnt out with kind of traditional tenure track academia at that point, and really wanted to explore other types of roles. I had the opportunity to serve as kind of an intern at the Center for Teaching and Learning at Arizona State, where I did my PhD, which kind of gave me a glimpse into what my current role would be like now, and was able to kind of build some of that that formative experience. That one, it was eye-opening to see kind of what positions within a Center for Teaching and Learning might look like, but also that it could be a position for me. And then from there, I kind of on a whim saw the position that I have now, applied to it, never even stepped foot in Rogue Island, more Brown. And this was when everything was still virtual when I first got started. And then, yeah, I was just saying this is my third year here now at Brown. And so 3 years later, I really enjoying my role. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you all for sharing your trajectories. I think we'll just go on to the next question. What do you do in your current role? What would a typical workday look like? And how do you employ the essential skills, experiences, or knowledge you've acquired during your PhD in your current role? If you aren't minding, can we start with you?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I have notes so I don't go on a tangent. So I oversee research compliance in 3 areas and support a 4th. So I'm the export control officer, so I am responsible for export control compliance at Brown. I am the research security point of contact, so I'm the main driver of Brown's research security program implementation, which is required by federal regulations. And I run one of the responsible conduct of research training programs at Brown. And one of my team members keeps completion records for RCR at Brown. And then during the busy season, I support the conflict of interest and research team. I have 2 direct reports who are grade 10 analysts, and I'm a grade 11 assistant director. A day, my main answer is I write a lot of emails. I write a lot of short but clear answers to oddball questions because of the knowledge, like the scope of the knowledge that I have. People send their weird questions to me, and I honestly really enjoy that. You know, my 2 analysts who are my direct reports, they do a lot of the day-to-day sort of regular reviews of things. So export control, we review international shipments, we review purchases coming into the university, and a lot of that doesn't require my input on the day-to-day. But then people will be like, hey, can I buy this camera that has military applications? And then I'll be like, okay, so that's a complicated answer, and handle that. I use a lot of the project management and organizational skills that I developed in my PhD all the time. So I don't have any formal training in project management, but it turns out I'm fairly good at it. And I'm part of a community practice among staff at Brown to get better at it. But I do a lot of like meeting facilitation and, synthesizing, lots of different opinions and regulations and figuring out, what's Brown's risk posture in a way, like in research security, and what's the risk analysis for doing things a certain way in export control. And then the RCR program is actually the place where I really apply my PhD knowledge most directly, because in that place I'm actually teaching early career graduate students about the various supports that there are at Brown for responsible cognitive research. I'm gonna stop there.
Okay. I don't have notes, so hopefully I don't ramble. So I work with Brown Technology Innovations, which is the technology transfer office for the university. So all research institutions have a tech transfer office. They're just called something slightly different. Our main role is, say sort of in a nutshell, is we manage the intellectual property portfolio for Brown University. So whether you know this or not, but as a employee of the university, which a PhD student and a postdoc counts because you get paid by the university, anything that you invent in a lab at the university as part of your academic pursuits belongs to Brown. Same thing with faculty, and actually same thing with staff, if we were to do it too. You may think that that sounds crazy because you're the one who invented it, but when you go off and work at a company, whoever you work for is going to own your intellectual property. So it's pretty standard as part of an employment contract. So essentially what we do is we try to understand where we should spend Brown's patent budget on patenting things or copywriting things. And then we don't like to patent just for the sake of having a patent and putting a plaque on some faculty member's wall. We want those patents to get out into the world and have some type of societal benefit. So that's most likely through commercialization. So we look for either established companies that might want to take this research and these inventions into their existing portfolio and continue to do the research and development on the outside and take things forward. Or we, more commonly, we've shifted more towards helping to form startups and put the pieces together to form startup companies that can take the technologies out. We also, in the course of this, help with any industry collaborative research. So if a company wants to come in and leverage the expertise of a particular lab at the university and do a collaborative research project or sponsor research here, we also support that because there's a lot of intellectual property components associated with that. So that's at a high level what our office does. I mean, my day-to-day, I write emails, but I'd say I'm in meetings more than I am writing emails, a lot of Zooms. But it's a lot of meeting with labs, so most commonly with faculty, but I also meet with PhD students and postdocs to understand what research is being done and what they think is potentially commercially relevant, and also thinking myself about what I think might be commercially relevant. I'm not an IP attorney, but I know enough about patents to be able to do a first pass of whether we think anything that's coming out of the lab and whether this research is worth patenting. I interact with, we have 3 or 4 outside law firms that we work with to file patents on our behalf. So I interface between the lab and the attorneys to write patents and to prosecute patents. And then I'm also going out and talking to companies and talking to venture capitalists and talking to entrepreneurs to try to explore what those potential pathways out of the university are. So our office is set up, there are basically 4 of us that have the same role as I do. 2 are on the physical sciences side, and then I'm on the life sciences side. So I work mostly with faculty and labs in biomedical engineering, neuroscience, so anything related to Carney for the most part, a little bit into biomed and public health, and then soon to be the hospital for some of my domains. Pause there.
Okay. So, and I'll try not to ramble too much as well. So I lead the Office of Research Strategy and Development. My team comprises of 7 staff, all of which have advanced degrees in a variety of areas, whether it's an MBA or a Master's in Public Health, Master's in Engineering. There's a PhD in French Studies, a variety of experiences and backgrounds. Ultimately, what my team does is we support faculty in their desire to have federal funding for their research. We try to ensure that they have diverse federal funding portfolios, and we do that in a variety of ways. From when they start off, we meet with them individually, one-on-one, to understand what their research objectives are and their long-term plans. Right up until working with the deans of the various units across campus to understand, what's the priorities for each unit and how we can leverage the resources across campus and our knowledge of the federal funding landscape to achieve that. My team is responsible for all internal funding opportunities for research. We have a seed program, a Solvent program, funding for the humanities research, funding for facilities, and we organize all that with a team of advisors. We are the point of contact for the Research Advisory Board with the Vice President for Research. We work with faculty to build teams, do some ideation, whether it's internally, building teams across campus, multi-institutional teams. Maybe it's bringing in BTI to get an industry partner. In fact, I think I work with all of these offices. We're really a convener, a facilitator, a coach, a mentor to faculty right across campus. I've got members of my team have various portfolios, like public health, biomed, engineering, physical sciences. And we also have someone who is responsible for prestigious nominations. So making sure that our faculty's great work is getting the recognition it deserves nationally and internationally. And my day-to-day work looks very different every single day. I could give yesterday as an example. I started off the day with a meeting with the Vice President of Research. I then had a meeting with the incoming Associate Vice Provost for AI on developing a response from Brown to a request for information around a national AI strategy. I then met with a team member, a one-on-one, to kind of see what's going on in their portfolio, which is public health. I think I had a break for about 15 minutes. And then it's working on a proposal that is in response to a National Science Foundation opportunity around quantum science. It goes on. Every day is very different. Every hour is very different. But how does my education help in this? From a scientific perspective, I think, it's not because I studied, polymer chemistry that is giving me the edge. It's the ability to be able to appreciate what the faculty are doing on a day-to-day basis, what it means to do research, what it means to be a graduate student, what it means to have a lab and to run a lab and to, understand when, you're writing in a graduate student in a proposal, that person is supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Well, that's necessary to be able to complete this component of the proposal. It's an appreciation for the science itself. And by science, we also support faculty in the humanities and social sciences. So it's the research, I should say, not just science. And there's I think life in general has kind of given me transferable skills that are very applicable to this job. Although I'm still learning, I would hate to be in a position that I don't learn on a daily basis, and I certainly do learn, and that's kind of part of the beauty. I've learned so much about the research right across campus through my position. It's it's a privilege really to be able to do it. Pass it on to you.
So I'll speak to the Sheridan Center with the teaching and learning side of the university. And so just maybe by show of hands, who's familiar with the Sheridan Center, folks? Yeah, very good. Okay, so the Sheridan Center broadly, I'll speak kind of broadly than the day-to-day, but broadly supports the teaching and learning mission of the university. So we heard a bunch about the research mission, but Sheridan Center supporting the teaching and learning mission. So and that comes in kind of many different flavors, from supporting faculty to graduate students and postdocs, and even our undergraduate students as well. And then my particular role as an assistant director is our graduate student and postdoc community. So I say that if you haven't been to the Sheridan Center, please come say hi. We're on the 7th floor in the science library. But we're here to support. My role specifically is to support graduate students and postdocs. So some folks might be familiar with some of the teaching certificate programs that the Sheridan Center offers. I know Tori was mentioning the teaching consultant program, which is part of one of the graduate certificates that we offer. So I get to work to support that program. So I kind of co-direct that program with someone else, and co-direct the teaching consultant program, which then works with our teaching seminar, our Sheridan teaching seminar as well. So I think one of the things that I actually do really appreciate about my role similarly is that kind of every day is different. So the seminar runs in the fall, and the teaching consultant program runs in the fall. And then in the spring, I run kind of what we call a local learning community, but a community of graduate students and postdocs who are interested in teaching or teaching related careers or want to become better teachers and instructors. And we kind of work together through a community of folks kind of interested in topics related to teaching and learning. The other thing that I really appreciate is meeting with all of you or meeting with graduate students and postdocs. So I do a lot of meeting on kind of career coaching or career kind of related conversations. So reviewing teaching statements, for example, is one part of my portfolio that I really enjoy doing and kind of getting to see folks kind of through to the next position that you might be interested in. So that's where I kind of get joy in working with other people and kind of having folks come visit. And then one kind of position or one responsibility, I guess, as it relates to my own PhD is the university is really pushing or kind of is a proponent of what they call collaborative and scholarly research experiences. But essentially what that means is incorporating authentic research into undergraduate and graduate classroom experiences. So if you're taking a course, perhaps, introductory biology or chemistry, we would call, something like a cookbook lab where you're just going through a step of instructions. We're doing experiments that have been, done time over and time over again. But the university is really interested in reforming some of the ways that we teach labs in terms of really thinking about how can we take the phenomenal research that's happening at Brown and that our faculty members are doing and actually insert that into the context of undergraduate courses, graduate courses, where students can actually experience what it is to do science, especially kind of in some of these introductory courses or kind of at the undergraduate level to get kind of exposure into what it actually means to do chemistry or do biology beyond, what we would call kind of lab. So that's something that I am really passionate about and kind of interested in. And we run some institutes and workshops around that. But I think, that's just been something that I was able to take kind of from my PhD into my current position in.
Thank you for your responses. So those are the two questions we have prepared. If anyone in the audience has any questions, we can open it up to for now.
I have a question for you, Dr. Lokingen. Were you able to integrate your passion for teaching during your PhD, and were you able to also incorporate it with your own PhD, like what you specifically do? So, instead of like biology as a whole, were you able to also focus in on what you specifically specialized in?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I have a couple thoughts, but one is with graduate school and completing a PhD, right? It requires research, right, and the attention to research, right, and I know there is this real and kind of perceived challenge of the amount of time that you spend teaching takes away from the amount of time that you're doing your research. So my faculty advisor, like many other faculty advisors, wanted me to be in the lab, wanted me to be doing research, and in some ways there was I would say conflict, but some difficult conversations around me wanting to spend time doing teaching related professional development, for example, and so kind of finding ways to still get VEF training was challenging. But I did have, as you were saying, I knew I had a passion for it, and I kind of made time to do that. Some things, actually, a resource I could go into detail, but there's a new initiative as part of that Brown is a part of, but it's called CERTL. But what it does is it allows some asynchronous ways to still obtain teaching professional development where you could, listen to something while you're in your lab and you have your earbuds in and you're running your experiment, right? But still being able to kind of engage in, teaching professional development. So I engaged in some of those sorts of things. It wasn't like, like taboo that I was wanting to move into a career in education, but it was a real and kind of perceived, as I said, kind of conflict in terms of time that I was spending at the Center for Teaching and Learning was time that I could be spent in the lab. But I knew that it was where I wanted to go professionally, and I kind of made that decision, especially as I was starting to finish out my PhD, that I wanted to spend time gaining kind of valuable experience in kind of what I do now. So, yeah, my short answer is it's challenging. It can be challenging, but making sure that that if that is something that you're interested in doing, kind of acquiring those sorts of experiences, even if it requires some difficult conversations as well.
Do you have any other questions?
So I noticed several you have degrees in fields that you're not like your current role was maybe not directly focused in. So I'm curious if I could go back to your PhD and you knew you wanted the role that you're in now, what type of experience and what type of things you would do, like internships or volunteer or anything to get you to your current.
I suppose I could search. Yeah, so my PhD is in neuroscience, and now I do export control research security. So nobody ends up there on purpose, and also research security was not a compliance area that existed until about 4 years ago. So I couldn't have prepared for it. But given where I am now, additional international collaboration experience would have been really helpful. Like my lab had a lot of domestic collaborations, but not a lot of international collaborations. And so, that's something that'd be helpful now because now people are asking me questions about international collaborations, and like I'm working from more of like a regulatory perspective than like a real world I've done it perspective.
I think I can say nobody wakes up saying, I want to do research development. Like that's just not a thing. And it's, I can say that because I have, there's a national organization called National Research Development Organization, and I'm a member of this, and I'm pretty active in the Northeast region. And all of us have come up through, this serendipitous path of this, brought us, experience in working with program managers, and somebody else's experience in writing proposals. These are things I would advise if it's something of interest to you, volunteering to either write a draft of a proposal for your advisor, or help it, like volunteer to review what they've written, volunteer to create graphics for it. Like just insert yourself into the proposal preparation process so that you get a feel for how to write these things, and then maybe you understand that like the NSF is very different than writing to the DOE, for example. Volunteering is a great way to kind of get that experience that's you're not going to get through being in the lab, and it could be teaching experience is always great to have, always a great asset. But communication of any sort, any of your presentations, like volunteer to present at your local high school or at your professional organization, like any kind, communicating science is key, because we communicate it daily and the audience changes. Like I'm communicating with maybe the VPR, but also with the local Rhode Island delegation, very different audience, but I have to be able to explain that. I think communication is a key skill to have.
I would echo that. So I think, through the grad school, there's the Research Matters program. If you don't know about it, look it up. Too late for this year, but for next year. And that program, if you're not familiar, is basically they sort of train you how to give like a 5-minute pitch presentation on your research for a layman's audience. And that's hugely valuable for I think all of our work, depending on, being able to adapt your research for your audience. I mean, in my role, the number of times I sit down with a faculty member to talk through their research and they like start going into the nitty-gritty details. And I'm like, even though yes, my PhD may be in the same area that their PhD is, doesn't mean that I'm an expert in their area. So you have to drag them out. And anytime we're going and presenting work outside the university to try to get an industry partner or see if there's venture capital interest in supporting a startup, you have to be able to communicate complicated science in a very straightforward way. So I think I agree that communication is huge. So any opportunity to do something like Research Matters or teaching or anything is going to be a great experience.
Yeah. And I just underscore like by communication, yes, verbal communication key, but also visual and data communication. Now, we handle tons of data. To be skilled and to be able to rapidly pull out, okay, this is the information that's actually critical, and to be able to present that information rapidly, that's also a skill.
I did Research Matters. If you go back in time to like the second or third cohort of them, you'll find me, and you'll find me talking about the point at which my research and where nothing works and we don't know why. Just for entertainment.
I'll just add, obviously I'm a huge advocate for centers for teaching and learning, but with this communication piece, especially perhaps as Dory was saying, engaging in something like our teaching consultant program, you are essentially taught to be a facilitator. And that's really broad or broadly applicable. So this could be, yes, it could be your, tenure track research professor, you're preparing for a lecture, or it could be, you're running a startup and you're running your lab meeting or a meeting with stakeholders, and kind of these themes of communication and presentation and, quote unquote teaching kind of are broadly applicable. And so kind of taking advantage of those sorts of resources and opportunities, and thinking that they don't just need to apply kind of in the unique context of teaching, but can be applied kind of outside of that, can be helpful too.
If I may, I just want to make a plug that. So we also have internships in our office every year. And so just keep an eye out for next September for ads. We're also looking for a summer student for this summer, if anyone's interested. That job ad should go out this week. So just a small plug, sorry.
We have interns in our office too.
I don't think we have any interns.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Do you have any other questions?
Just want to ask, during the current situation, how is the federal funding cut impact my office?
Has impacted my office? What attitude? So our office, as I said, we support the faculty. So where traditionally around this time we're trying to build teams and targeting funding opportunities, we're now listening to the faculty and trying to help them pivot away from agencies that may no longer be supporting them, and working towards other but federal agencies, but then also working with Melissa and her team and industry sponsored research. And then we're also working with corporate and foundation relations because some foundations will support their research. So we're doing a lot of that right now, a lot of outreach, networking, panels, webinars, that sort of thing. But we also have, this is also what we call NSF career season. So junior faculty will be submitting their NSF careers at the end of July. And we provide a lot of resources around the broader impact side of their proposals. We've got a webinar coming up, or a workshop, I think, coming up on the broader impact side. And then we host a mock panel review for their proposals in June. So this is the season where we're getting that activity up and running. So in some ways, it's kind of the same, because we are encouraging faculty to continue submitting proposals to those agencies that are still accepting proposals, because it's important. It's important for everyone to see that there is a need for these programs, and if the numbers drop off, then it doesn't bolster the argument within the agencies that these programs should remain funded. So we're just continuing to submit where possible.
Yeah, in general, sort of our patenting and commercialization pathway is kind of a lag on grants, right? You get the grant, you do the research, and then you patent something. So maybe I'll have a different answer in a couple of years on the impact. So we're continuing to sort of pursue that commercialization pathway, but as Adele mentioned, we're putting a lot more emphasis on our supportability, our ability to support industry-sponsored or industry collaborative research. In general, I don't know, faculty feel much more comfortable with going after federal grants, but I think this has been a little bit of a wake-up call that they have to diversify where funding is coming from. And so we've seen a lot more interest in kind of exploring how they can work with companies and look for other pathways to kind of get their work funded and out there.
My regulations aren't going anywhere, and they're getting more complicated by the day. So like on the day to day, you know, there's a lot of things that have stayed the same. I would say that the part that's changed is I'm getting a lot more questions that are in the framework of like, is it okay if I keep doing this international collaboration? And the answer to that question is always, it depends. And so I was spending a lot of time in the like gray area of it depends. And then some of the export control regulations got tightened about 6 months ago or so. And so we're more likely to need a specific license for an export control activity. So there's more activity in that space than there has been. But I would say that we're not seeing, like my little team of export control and research security, we've seen an increase in random questions, but not an increase in like our general like stable work.
Yes. I have a question because I am doing a startup trying to screen early diabetes by detecting albumin in human urine, but we are trying to find the molecule that only react to albumin and give some color reaction. So we're trying to find that person who know the molecular. And then every time I walk into some talks, to let them introduce their friends who know the technology to me, they're reluctant because they feel like I might be a competitor in their field. So how do you suggest me to go out and find those people? Because you mentioned that people who have their research, they usually go to different conferences and talk to people and find whether some startups would be willing to cooperate. But I don't know where to go next. How do you suggest me to go?
I mean, we can have a separate conversation afterwards. I can learn a little bit more details about kind of what you're looking for. I mean, within Brown, you shouldn't have competition issues because we're all operating under a code of conduct that we're all supposed to keep everything confidential and what have you under the Brown umbrella. So there shouldn't be an issue with sort of talking to anyone else within Brown. Once you start leaving the university and talking to other companies out there or other universities, that's where you can, I mean, you should be protective of what you present at a conference, and others are going to be protective of what they have. So maybe I don't know if I have a direct, I might need to know a little bit more about what you're specifically looking for before I can get specific advice. But I mean, that is a general sort of comment that if you're going out and presenting your research at a conference, if you're thinking at all about sort of the commercialization pathway, once you disclose your work publicly, whether that's a poster at a conference, a presentation at a conference, putting a paper up on bioRxiv or one of the other archive sites, or you get something published, that's considered public disclosure and it impacts your ability to patent. So if you are thinking commercial pathway, have a conversation with us first before you go and release it to the public. And that's where, once you have some IP protected, it frees up your ability to go and talk to others, and it may loosen up how other people talk to you. But again, maybe we can talk after this about more specifics.
Yes.
I have a somewhat like kind of basic question for everyone. I'm wondering like how, it's great to learn about all these different jobs, and I'm wondering like how do you look for people to hire? Like where are these kinds of jobs in higher education that are off the tenure track, like STED or get work, read, and keep finding more?
So for research developers, the National Organization for Research Development Professionals, NORDP, has a website and a job listserv on that website, and you'll see them all across the country there. And the other place would be the Chronicle of Higher Education.
So Tech Transfer has a group called Autumn, Association for University Technology Managers, I think, at UTM. Same thing.
Yeah.
There's a job board there.
There's a more general group called NCURA, which is the National Council for University Research Administrators, and so that includes like people who do grants management and like the whole wide world of research administration. And they also have a job board on their website that I think is probably a little bit more general than the ones you guys just mentioned. But honestly, LinkedIn, Brown posts jobs on LinkedIn. In addition to everywhere else. By two people, I hired them in November and December. So I just did this, and LinkedIn was like the place where I was able to get like the most breadth of candidates from. I will say that like I had 85 people apply for 2 jobs, just for realistic sake.
I would just say for our field, it's education development is the broad field, but there's a organization called Professional and Organizational Development. So POD is the acronym, but they say it's similar, have a mailing list, a national conference. And I would just share that some of types of organizations like this, so I know POD in particular sponsors graduate students to attend, and that's a great opportunity if you're even dabbling or kind of thinking about dabbling in a particular field or career. There might be some funding opportunities to actually attend and network and kind of get to know what the field you may be going into is like, similar to, basic science or academic conferences.
I mean, also Brown has a job board, right? So you can always look there, although we're on a hiring freeze, but that's another issue.
Yes, that's separate.
Yes. So most of you had job experience in a job that may not be directly related to what you do now, but was job experience necessary post PhD to get to where you are now? Or have you seen people jump from like PhD to an assistant director role?
Sorry, this is my first position after my PhD. So I guess as an N of 1, it's possible. But I think it was valuable having the internship type experience with a similar center that I was working with in my PhD, or similar to here if you were a teaching consultant or kind of have some experience with that. So, but I really leverage that in cover letters and interviews, and in my references, for example, were folks that I work with there. So, and again, job descriptions will kind of likely have some insight into that, but they were looking for some amount of experience in the role that I was in. But it is an assistant director position, so there was not a high expectation for the others might have more insight for recently hiring folks.
I am nearly 10 years in this office, in my office, but I started off as a research development specialist. And I'm trying to think of the job description. I think there was an expectation of some experience to come with post PhD. A postdoc would have been sufficient. And so I went from research development specialist to associate director to senior director. And the team has grown under my leadership, and I've hired an associate director, but I do expect some level of experience at associate director level. I recently hired a research development manager is his title, and he has a master's in engineering and had some experience in a post, like as a research associate, but that wasn't a prerequisite for that position. It was just a bonus, I felt. So for us, the entry level positions, as I call them, can be directly from graduate school. But the higher level. I'm trying to develop a career trajectory within the office. And so I do expect some kind of level of experience, like graduates plus kind of experience.
The way that our office is structured right now, we're really small, really lean. I guess all of our offices are, but all of our business development directors are sort of at the same level. We don't have a hierarchy. So we really, to get to the director level, you need some amount of industry experience. However, other tech transfer offices at other universities are much larger and have those entry-level positions. So Columbia, as an example, where I did my PhD and interned, they do, well, I don't know about now, but at least at the time, they had entry-level positions, and you can sort of work your way up within the office. So if you are interested in tech transfer directly out of PhD or postdoc, that is possible. Probably not at a smaller office like Brown, but if you look at like a Columbia or an MIT or a Stanford, there may be opportunities for entry-level positions there.
Yeah. So I didn't start as an assistant director. This is actually my third position. So right from my PhD, I was a grants and financial coordinator. And then from there, I was a research compliance manager. So it's got a different name, but the people I now supervise, like that's the role I had. And then I became an assistant director. So, and I have done that over the course of almost 7 years. Yeah, because my kid just turned 7. And so I think that the initial position was like right place, right time. And then after that, it was like my network at Brown's because I've been here the whole time. And that was really helpful. Not necessarily, the grants and financial coordinator experience doesn't directly translate to export control. But having the understanding of like the grants life cycle, like pre-award, post-award, doing budgets, writing grants, the whole 9 yards of it, plus having been in a research lab was really useful for being able to understand and analyze Brown's portfolio of things that are export controlled. And then I was also doing a lot of conflict of interest work, and that's a lot of looking at grants, looking at people's outside financial interests. So like startups are a lot of it, and comparing the startups to their research and bringing it to a board to determine if there are financial conflicts of interest. So like there's all these different pieces that kind of fit together. And I wouldn't say that any one piece was like the thing. But I had a couple of different like right place, right time kind of like things happen. And you could say like, oh, well, that's all luck. But I don't think that being in the right place at the right time is always luck. There's an element of luck, but there's also a big element of networking. And like being the person who people are like, oh yeah, she's reliable. Like she can learn how to do this new thing. Like that's what happened with research security. I had been doing stuff and doing it well and, hitting deadlines and like not dropping things. And so people were like, yeah, she's reliable. She can run those meetings. She can make the agendas. And now I run meetings that are like most of the people that report to the provost, like that level of people, to talk about research security.
Yes.
So I noticed you all completed your PhD, natural science or STEM subject. So for someone completing their PhD in the social science subject, so to understanding how much they bring their skills and perspectives they gained from a social science background to bring to the work you're currently doing. I know there will be like overlap between like the skills you did through like STEM education, that like social science education, but we'll not to hear your thoughts.
I have thoughts, but I don't want to monopolize things. Go for it. Okay. So one of the other compliance areas in my office is the Human Subjects Research Protection Program, and they review all the IRB protocols, and like there's a very significant social sciences portfolio there. So that's somewhere to like kind of think about is human subjects research compliance. It's sort of like a possible thing with under research compliance. But I would say that actually the like the conflicts of interest space has a lot of people already who know like sciences and natural sciences, but there is starting to be like a more of a portfolio of like funded research under social sciences that also needs to be reviewed against people's outside interests and stuff like that. And so, you know, I don't think that it's necessarily like the life science PhD is like what made me and then the person who runs the conflict of interest program like the best at this. We're probably not the best at this. There are lots of people who are really good at it, and some of them do have social science backgrounds.
I think with the work that I do from a commercial standpoint, I think you naturally sort of go towards STEM, right? STEM is going to lead to technologies that you're going to patent that can lead to a company. And our office being relatively small, we tend to focus on the STEM areas of the university, but we do have disclosures have come in from other departments, and we sort of address them as they come in and figure out what the correct paths are. But we're all STEM backgrounds. I actually recently read there was an article in that Penn put out about their tech transfer office, and they were feeling like they were putting so much emphasis on like life sciences and things coming out of the med school that they actually hired someone to focus specifically on the non-STEM areas. And they profiled in this article technologies and commercial strategies they put together for, I think it was like something out of anthropology, something out of architecture, something out, I can't remember what the other one was, but it was sort of looking at these, I guess what you would call sort of non-traditional tech areas and thinking about, you know, startups and commercial partners there. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for all areas from a commercial standpoint. It just traditionally is a little more on the STEM side.
So I have someone on my staff who has a background in social sciences. I alluded to that at the beginning. For me, it's not necessarily you have to come from a STEM field. It's more an appreciation of what research is about across the research enterprise at a university. Having said that, her portfolio is she's got two main priorities. One is engaging with institutions around the state and understanding the state's priorities and the state's strengths, and that's right across the field, not just like the Ocean Tech Hub, but also what other kind of social questions might be arising out of the state that could be answered as part of a research question, and maybe at Brown, but maybe it's a collaboration with Brown and Roger Williams. So she's kind of leading those kind of collaborations. And the other part of her work is being supportive of institutional level proposals. So if a proposal has to go in from whether it's the provost or the VPR, like she can go in and help write those ones. So I think her background is great for this. I will also say that the NSF is encouraging us to encourage the faculty in the social sciences to apply more. And so there is tremendous, I think, value, and I think that is increasing the awareness of the necessity of social scientists, not just in their individual, not just as part of a collaboration, but also to lead collaborations, and that's where we would like to kind of push that as well. So there's a lot of folks in the research development area with a background in social science and humanities as well, I would say.
And I'll just add that one thing I love about our center is how interdisciplinary it is. And so we have, so I'm part of our STEM hub, we're kind of our STEM team, which is 4 or 5 of us. But we also have an assessment hub, and they do assessment and evaluation on teaching and learning at the university. And they're made up of 3 folks who are all social scientists. And they work a lot with institutional research and really thinking about the assessment side of things. So but that our center has history PhDs, and we have our writing center as part of our center who folks in English and those sorts of things. So our center, like I said, that's what I love, is it's really interdisciplinary.
In grad school, I feel like a big question that I've talked about in my career is the industry versus academia. And given that you're kind of in both but neither, how did you and that touch you when you were in grad school, or what changed your ends?
and I left academia.
My biggest gripe is that when people say academia, they mean faculty positions, and they need to be specific. Like that's my biggest gripe from grad school, is that people conflate academia with faculty positions, and that's not true. There's tons of people around here who do really interesting jobs. There's 100 of us in the division of research, and not all of us have PhDs. Like, a lot of people are like accountants. But there's a lot that goes on in a university that is not faculty, and that is like equally interesting work, in my opinion. And that what people are saying, oh, is it industry versus academia? Your question to them is, well, what do you mean by academia? Do you mean faculty positions? Because we're not talking the same language.
I mean, I think you can make the same argument on the industry side, right? Like, there's industry R&D, which is going to look very similar to doing work in a lab here. You're just doing it for a company. Or industry could be doing something on the business side or on the finance side where you're not touching anything related to the science. So I think there's such a wide range of definitions on both industry and academia that it shouldn't just be one or the other. It should really be, do you want to stay in research? Or if not, how far away do you want to get from research?
That's a good approach, yeah.
I have to say, for me, this question never arose. And part of the reason was I actually did my PhD in industry. So I did all my research with BASF, with the chemical company in Germany. And it ended up that way because I wanted to do it that way. And my way of doing things has always been, well, it hasn't been done before, but I can do it. That's just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean you cannot do it. Nobody did it. In my university, that was. And so I wouldn't say or, like academia or industry. I would say and, like, why not? It is possible. And so, yeah, I didn't have that question posed to me at all.
Not sure I have anything to add.
Do we have any questions? And I might ask a final question. So in hiring new people, what do you look for in prospective candidates, and what distinguishes the successful hires for the rest of the ACK? I guess the more respected questions. So.
I feel like I've gone first a lot, so someone else. You go first, Melissa, this time. I guess you guys are first.
I mean, I think if we're hiring for an equivalent of what my role is, I think that we're looking for sort of strength and breadth of academic background. So, having that research experience from a PhD is really valuable because you understand, one, you know how to read papers and you've gone through coursework and you've done research, like you understand how that whole research process works. But we're also looking for the ability to kind of take a step back and feel comfortable with research beyond your individual, thesis project. So I think there's definitely a scientific component, but then there's also going back to the communication of how can you have a conversation? I mean, a lot of our interviews are talking about having conversations with faculty members of how would you go in and approach a conversation to learn what they're doing, to really pull out what is potentially commercially relevant, but then also have potentially a difficult conversation back of, okay, you may think this is the greatest thing, but these 10 companies over here are like 10 stages ahead of you, and yours is never going to make it to market because they're ahead of you. So we're not going to patent your technology. And we have to have conversations like that too. And those are painful. But it's looking for people that can understand the science, but then also have that relationship with faculty, and then also be able to communicate things outward to companies and what have you. I'm really not talking coherently right now, but hopefully that makes sense. It's science, but then it's also being able to sort of take the step back, look at the bigger picture, and be able to communicate to a variety of audiences.
For me, yes, they have to have a good, solid understanding of the research enterprise, and usually that's, as I said, because they've gone through it themselves. I I look for an enthusiasm about research and a desire to learn more and to not necessarily be the front of that research, but be willing to push that research forward from the background, like they're willing to work in the background. I have a large team and we're very collaborative, so I look for somebody who's going to work well with my team. And I had interviews with folks who were awesome people, but there was no way they were going to fit with my team. And I just had to say, I'm sorry, no, it's just not going to work out. There's definitely a place for that person in research development, but not within my team. And so I do, and my team, we all value teamwork. And, we do a lot of things together, like events, and we do a lot of brainstorming and strategizing together. And we want somebody to be able to contribute from their experiences to that team, so that they're kind of the main things, as well as everything else that's been said before.
And I haven't hired anyone yet, but I would kind of, I guess, maybe position my answer based on maybe an equivalent position that I would have for, at either here at Brown or at another institution. Typically, some amount of, as we were talking about, communication or facilitation experience would be helpful. So I know often that can be challenging to get as a graduate student, but often we have folks facilitate a workshop over lunch when they come for a visit, something in their discipline or as it relates to teaching and learning, for example. And then also we do kind of mock consultations, similar to what we were talking about. If you were to meet with a faculty member and talk about, a course redesign, kind of what would you do? And I think maybe just one other skill or attribute that I would add be kind of problem solving is kind of something that we think a lot about, of like, this instructor comes to you with this problem, how do you get kind of from point A to point B, in kind of that role that you would play as a consultant or kind of a facilitator in that manner. And then, I would just kind of second everything else. So we do work, with a center of 30 folks. So, really collaborative and, kind of teamwork is really valued in the Port.
Yeah. So for the more entry-level positions that I just hired for, the differentiating factor was communication skills. And so, the people with the strong cover letters that were like clear and concise and told me why they wanted this job in particular, because it's a bit of an odd job because it's written to cover 4 compliance areas, and people often only have experience in one or none, which was also completely fine. But anybody with like a rambling cover letter, like, they got kind of chucked out pretty early on. And then that sort of difference was, when I actually interviewed them and we had a conversation back and forth, the people who were able to kind of talk through questions and do it in a way that was like honest and made it clear and made it clear when they didn't know the answer, and they weren't just like making things up, because it's really important to not make things up. The most important thing you can do in my field is to say, I need to go reread the regulations to make sure I give you the right answer, because there's a lot of nuance in there. And so I'm looking for that sort of ability to like know when you need to go back to the regulations, know when you have reached the end of your knowledge. And the people I hired actually came from backgrounds that were not directly export control or research security. And that's fairly common in the entry-level positions in research security and export control, like having some knowledge of research, some experience in academic research. PhD is great for that. Sometimes being a grant administrator is also great for that. But that experience, and then you can learn from there. Reading export control regulations is actually not that different from reading scientific papers, because it's a lot of like digging into the details.
Yes.
Here, can I ask a final question? I am trying to get a PhD degree in not very STEM
majors. Like I want to teach. Like I want to be a professor in the future, teaching entrepreneurship and innovation. So my ideal PhD degree is gonna be like in like finance, business, or entrepreneurship. Does it require me to publish a lot of paper before I get the degree, or do I need to network with a lot of professors to get that degree? And where do you see those people ended up doing after thesis kind of PhD degree?
So I'm not sure about trying to get into a PhD program, and that might be a question for the grad school. I don't know if we can address necessarily that. But I think, I mean, in general, if you're interested in teaching business or entrepreneurship later, I mean, I think the most critical piece is actually going to be your experience between your PhD and when you teach, is being able to go out and whether you start your own company or you work with startup companies or you do something like tech transfer or you work in consulting or do something that you can come back and bring back to the teaching experience. So not that you have to follow my path, but like I now teach it. Well, I did this past fall, taught a class in engineering on technology commercialization and entrepreneurship. There's no way I would have ever been able to teach that had I not like worked out in industry and then come back and worked at the tech transfer office. Like I couldn't have taught that directly out of my PhD, regardless of what my PhD was, because you just don't have kind of that real experience to bring to the teaching experience. So I think that's something to, if that's your ultimate end goal, you know, I think actually what you choose for your PhD is probably not as important as what you ultimately do with it in between. That's my own opinion. Someone else may have a different opinion.
I think we'll have to conclude the panel here due to time. But thank you all for coming in. Thank you to all the panelists for your perspectives. And so we'll just conclude the floor. Thank you.